Welcome to Save Our Sleep. Tizzie and the Save Our Sleep team believe it's every child's right to receive comfort, a parent's right to demonstrate love, and everyone's right to a full night of sleep.
This podcast is being recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of this place and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. The Save Our Sleep podcast is dedicated to helping you prevent and solve sleep problems while having some fun along the way. We endeavour to discuss all things family related, starting from preconception all the way through to an adult child leaving home and beyond. Some topics may be distressing. If you find this is the case, please reach out to you or your child's health nurse or general practitioner.
Hi Zoe.
Hi Tizzie, how are you?
Good.
That's good. So tell me, what have you been up to this week?
Well, isn't it like what's the crack or hi mate or what did you say last week?
G'day mate.
And what's the crack?
What's the crack, Tizzie?
Oh, I don't know if I should be telling our viewers, like maybe we need to be moving further apart.
Okay.
That's okay, don't worry. I'm in the clear now. So the COVID that we were trying to avoid on the houseboat.
Okay. Oh no.
So we were on the houseboat, yeah? And something I didn't mention was that after we got in the houseboat, we got a message from one of the kids' schools to say, I'm not as upbeat as I sound because we've had a pretty crap week. We got a message from one of the schools to say that one of the kids had been exposed to COVID, which in a way, in hindsight, is kind of lucky. And it was like they'd been on school camp, they'd been in a room with someone with COVID, they were a household contact, even though it was school camp. I don't even know why school camps are on, like seriously at the moment. They just cause sleep deprivation. Mother and child alike. Anyway, and this child apparently was a close contact. It was like, well, you should come back and isolate for 7 days. But we were on a houseboat. We weren't going to see anyone. And, we just decided, you know what? We're on a houseboat. We're already here. It's too late. We've dropped the in-laws to the wedding, whatever. Okay. So then, Granny and Poppy came on the houseboat for the last night. And we were terrified that maybe someone had COVID. And those traps for the mice, which I did this, you should never lie because your lies come true. I did a Facebook live feed or a podcast or not a podcast, a live feed. Like saying that those strips were for COVID.
Yes.
Well, they were.
Okay.
They saved us because we were so worried about us giving Poppy COVID that we wore face masks everywhere and we shut all the bedroom doors. And those strips to stop the mice coming in saved us because the sad thing is, the crap thing is, don't worry, I'm not in isolation because I haven't seen any of them, was Poppy actually had COVID. So Nathan's dad with MND actually had COVID when he was on the houseboat. We didn't know.
Okay.
And he was wearing a ventilator. So this is not medical, this is my interpretation. I think the ventilator was sucking in his air and then pushing it out. So luckily he was in the room with the door shut with what we thought were mice traps, but they were COVID traps. And he had to try and get to the point. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'll get really upset. We got back Tuesday night, and when I saw you last week for the podcast, I hadn't seen Nathan because his dad was really tired, and we didn't know he had COVID, and we thought he was just really tired, and he's got MND, and Nathan's his carer. So Nathan went and stayed with them, and then they all had to go and get COVID tests because Nathan's dad was supposed to, but now hasn't, go into hospital last night. We recorded last week on Wednesday, we're recording this week on Monday because of the way the podcast or Labour Day weekends affected us. And so he was supposed to go into hospital and have his ventilator changed. And so Nathan and his mum and his dad had to have PCR tests. The mum and dad had them first to go into hospital on Sunday night, and the PCR test came back with COVID.
Oh no.
Anyway,
so
it's not good. It's really upsetting actually. Nathan's pretty crook. I haven't seen him, so I'm here, but I'm really upset. I'm being mum, dad, school lunch maker. Like, Nathan's all worried because he had no warning. Like, normally when Nathan disappears for a week, he makes lunches and he'll do lunch orders for the kids and he'll leave all the lunches out and he'll write notes. I really need to find you guys a photo to share. I'm going to find a photo. Team here, make sure I give you the photo of when Nathan goes away and he lines up all the lunchbox brown paper bag orders with all the notes of what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to put in, because he's the mum. He's the man of the house. Anyway, he's upset because he's now at his parents' house. He's isolating. He's really, really crook. His dad's fine. Like, his dad's got MND, but his dad is fine. His mum is really, really, really crook. We all wore masks because we were so scared we'd get or give them COVID.
Sure.
They got the COVID somehow. We think maybe somewhere where we stopped on the way up or down. And his dad's fine. His mum's really crook. And Nathan seems to be the crookest. I'm really scared. Can we just move on?
Yeah.
Like, this is pretty scary.
Yeah, it is really scary.
I don't like COVID.
No, I don't think many of us do. No. Okay, well, thoughts with you and your family this next week. What have I been up to? Can I lighten the mood?
Yes, lighten the mood, quick. Make us happy.
I performed another beautiful wedding ceremony on the weekend, an elopement. So it's actually just the couple and their parents, so their mums and their dads, on the beach at 13th Beach in Bowen Head. So that was really beautiful.
That's where we had our wedding reception.
Is it really?
Yeah.
On the beach?
No, at 13th Beach, golf links, golf course.
Yes, of course, yeah. Beautiful part of the world, aren't we so lucky?
And that's where Nathan and Dara are lifeguards.
Okay,
13th
yeah,
Beach.
of course. Yeah. And so that was really beautiful. And then I went straight from there to my best friend's birthday dinner, so dinner with the girls. And actually, I sort of let them in for the first time ever on the podcast. So letting them know what I was about to embark on with yourself, and sort of discussing with them my, I suppose, slight concerns. I'm just an average girl and you're an international baby whisperer.
Not really, by the way.
Somewhat controversial as well. So I suppose there's a bit of hesitation there from me, what I might see come in my inbox, associating myself with you and the brand. But it was really nice. The girls reassured me, and something that I wish I had have really told myself was that I might get the odd person coming in and questioning me, and I actually have put on there to go ahead and challenge me, because then I'll challenge you.
Put on where?
On my Instagram page.
I know, Zoe has her own Instagram page now.
So please jump on there and have a look. And please do get in touch with me really kindly, because I'm a very sensitive person. But basically the girls really encouraged me. They're so excited. They're so excited to hear what we both have to say and what comes of the podcast, because we're not 100% sure just yet. Here we are just winging it. And the ultimate goal is that I'm here to help other mums and dads and carers navigate these first couple of years with their kids.
There's a couple of things that I take from what you're saying that you really have to think about, right? One thing, I used to get really, really upset with people who used to send me stuff contradicting whatever. And this guy, Brett Gilbertson, once said to me, "Congratulations, someone hates your brand." And he was like, "You're doing a good job branding. If someone hates your brand, you're getting out there and you're doing a good job branding." So that changed my opinion of all of the, when people criticised. But the other thing I realised was the people who were criticising Save Our Sleep, I used to think maybe they were jealous or whatever, but then I realised they just haven't read the book.
Sure.
And even if some people, like, when you look on the internet, there's stuff written about the book. And when I read that, I think, oh my God, that person's a torturer, you know?
Yes.
But it's not the book, it's about the book. They take a line from here and a line from there. We'll talk about that more in other shows, but not today. We're not going to, but that's really interesting. But the other thing is, like I mentioned in the first show, that, you know, you go to the car and you'll get 10 notes. Well, it's probably 1 out of 30 is a disgruntled person who is uninformed about the book and doesn't understand it and wants to say that you torture children, you tie them to rockets and you send them to space. But all the rest are like, you saved my life, you saved my marriage, you saved my child. Oh my goodness, I wish I'd discovered the book sooner. You're amazing, you're this, you're that. Like, so I reckon you're going to get so much more, and I won't because I don't leave the house, but you'll be walking down Paco with your baby, 2 4-year-old boys and the bump when it's a baby, and you're going to get so much more hugs and thank yous. And I really
bring
think
on the hugs and the thank yous.
that it's going to be really positive, and you're going to see a totally different side, because I get so much more thank yous than not thank yous.
So you should.
So, episode 3?
3, we've made it.
Yes. This is week 3, episode 3.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about formula in the first episode, and the second episode we ended up talking about blankets and togs and so on. And let's talk about, you wanted to talk about the importance of a routine.
Yes, yeah, sort of leading on. So we've just had baby. We're either still in hospital or we've taken baby home, and we were discussing why some people might not start with the book, but
Yeah.
we really want to encourage them to start with the book and the routines.
So I think the importance of the routine, there's a couple of things. Oh, excuse me. So there's a couple of things with the importance of a routine. So we were talking about, a baby in special care goes on a routine. We've sort of already touched on it. A baby in the ward doesn't necessarily go on a routine, but routines are really, really important. Now, they're important because if a mum just feeds, and at some point we'll talk about breastfeeding further on in the book, and this is just the beginning, and we'll talk in a lot more detail.
There's more.
But if a mum doesn't breastfeed on a routine, there's a risk in the first few days that the baby might just sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep, and then the mum's not going to get milk supply.
Yes.
And some babies are too weak to wake up and demand a feed.
Yep.
And then in the old days, they used to do like a 4-hour routine in hospital. And by the time the mum left, then mum stayed in hospital for 2 weeks. And by the time the mum left hospital, her milk had dried up. Now we know the best thing is a 3-hour feeding routine for the breasts, not the baby. So a baby would like 4 hours, but your breasts need 3 hours. So if you do a 3-hour routine, you're going to get better milk supply. If you start the routine if you start the first feed of the day at the same time every day, so every feed's at the same time, and milk's going to be a better quality. The thing is, when you use a routine, we know babies like routines because, like, even you'd probably see this with your own boys, like, children like to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. If they want to watch, like, I'm going to go way back to years and years ago when I had this little girl in my care, and she wanted to watch Shrek over and over and over again because she knew what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. They don't want to watch the next episode of Shrek. They want to watch the one that they've always watched. Yeah. Babies are the same. They want to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Now, in the ideal world, you wouldn't use a routine. You'd demand feed your baby. I developed my routines not by saying, I'm going to put a baby on a routine and this is what we're going to do, but I was lucky enough to go to Mozambique and watch women in the natural environment of they demand fed babies, but they could because they were tied to them. Like, you can't now, you can go, I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to be, I don't want to say hippie, but I'm going to have a baby. And I thought you were a hippie. Are you a hippie now?
I'm definitely a daughter of a hippie. And
I always thought that you were like that, and now I'm like, Zoe's on like, did you know that you ghosted me? Do you know what that means?
You tell any of my friends I introduced to you that I ghosted you.
So I originally met Zoe because her friend Sarah worked in my office for many, many years. And Sarah told me that she had this friend who had a baby at 25 weeks and 3 days. And then I wanted to follow how the babies were doing. So I asked to follow her on her private Instagram page and she didn't let me.
But that's what I'm saying.
And it was my first ghosting. I was Tizzie Hall.
I did not know who Tizzie Hall was.
I am Tizzie Hall. Anyhow, you ghosted. Well, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so in the ideal world, if you were some type of mum who could have your baby strapped to you, tied to you, never put them in a pram, you never put them in a car seat, and you'd feed them every time they cried a hungry cry. So the routines were developed by I was away in Mozambique and I saw these women and they're in fields and they'd come in and they'd all sit down and they'd be feeding the babies and then they'd go out and some more would come in and I was like saying to them, well, a couple of things. The first thing, which was really weird, was, did you know that they don't feed their own babies when they're born?
No.
I don't get this, because what about the colostrum?
Right.
Yeah.
Do they not know the importance of it, or
does
a mum with more milk feed the baby?
So what happens is, the really, really young mum who's had her first baby, so they'll be like, you're the young mum, I'm the old mum, can I feed your baby? So when the baby's born, the baby is given to the mum whose boobs have breastfed loads of times and are like conditioned. Yes, so the nipples are all good, know how to feed, not going to get cracked and sore and bleeding, which actually never happened to me because I followed a woman in the UK called Claire Barron Cook.
Right.
And she is fantastic, lactation, I don't know what her official name is, but feeding on routine. That baby gets given to the boobs that know how to feed, and then the new baby is given, and then the new mum is given the older baby who already knows how to feed.
And
then I keep saying, but then the older baby gets the colostrum, not the milk.
I suppose they eventually get it. No,
but when they're older.
Okay, no,
I don't know, I don't. Okay, so we're not going to do that then?
No, we're not going to do that.
I don't have any milk, so we're not going to do it anyhow.
Sure.
But it's interesting. Okay, so watching these women, they came in and they'd sit down, and I'd say to them, what age is your baby? 6 weeks. Oh, what age is your baby? 6 weeks. What age is your baby? 6 weeks. Why have all these women got babies the same age? They'd all disappear. A few minutes later, what age is the baby? 8 weeks, 8 weeks. And I suddenly realised that all the 6-week babies demanded a feed at this time. All the 8-week babies demanded a feed at this time.
Oh, wow.
Wrote them all down. That's where the routines came from. For the breastfeeding routines.
Wow.
Yeah. So, if you could demand feed, now the true meaning of demand feed is to feed your baby when your baby cries a hungry cry. But when you first had your boys...
How do you know what a hungry cry is? Any cries. Is every cry a hungry cry?
No, the cry that goes... Wah, 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 wah. And it doesn't change tone and it doesn't change pitch. That's a hungry cry. The cry that goes wah, 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 wah. That's not a hungry cry because that's stopping and starting and changing.
Yeah.
So the hungry cry is wah, 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 and it doesn't change. Now the hungry cry will go until that baby either flakes with exhaustion or is fed.
Is that's what you call the emotional cry too?
Yes,
yeah.
That's an emotional, that's an I want, that's an I need cry. And you only really see that till about 12 weeks.
Okay.
Really, especially when they've started solids, you don't see that. So when your baby's like 6, 7, 8, 9 months, if they're emotional crying, it's not because they're hungry. You don't have to worry about it then. They've hurt themselves or they've banged their head on the side of the cot because they didn't have enough bedding. Anyway, so you feed your baby when your baby cries a hungry cry, okay?
Yes.
So the routines, the feedback I get from mums is they love the routine from day one, especially some people do it from day one with their first, other people come back and do it from day one with their second and third because the baby cries and they look at the routine and they go, oh, the baby's due a sleep now. That must be the baby's tired cry. And then they learn the tired cry. Oh, the baby's due a feed next. That must be the baby's hungry cry. And then they know that that's the baby's hungry cry and it's due a feed now. So the feedback I get is the routines help them to learn their baby's cries. I also get feedback that like they can make an appointment, like their 6-week check. It's so much easier. Like I hear people say on the internet, I read, you shouldn't read, never read the internet about you, about me, about the podcast. Can we make a deal?
Noted.
We're not going to read any negative stuff about the podcast.
Okay.
Or maybe we have to, I don't know. Anyhow.
You can do that.
So,
summarise to me.
And if people see negative stuff, don't send it to us. Because there's nothing worse than people keep sending you. No one sends you the positive stuff. And you don't want to see it. You don't want to know about it. Like, there's so much stuff out there about me. I mean, did you know I'm childless?
Yeah, I have heard that you're childless.
This week it would be so much easier if Nathan was at his parents' house with COVID and I was childless and I could just worry about myself, you know? Anyway, so you... if you need to make your 6 weeks... So I was saying, you read on the internet, that like... oh, routine, they're not robots, and oh, you can't have a life on a routine. It's the opposite. Because I actually think they are robots. Because if they weren't robots, and I'm going to get quoted on this is going to be out there with the uninformed. Tizzie Hall says, firsthand, babies are robots. We are robots. Humans are robots. We all need sleep. We all need routine. You said to me today, this morning, oh, I haven't had breakfast. We were walking up here and you said, oh, I haven't had, for those who haven't listened to the first or second one, we're coming up the night before the podcast and staying the night. And last night we had to sleep we didn't see each other because this whole just being extra careful with COVID and stuff. But I've not seen anyone with COVID and I've had a PCR test and I'm in the clear. But anyway, and the time lapse has gone. But now you see, I've lost my trail. Yes, that's it. Thank you. You said, I can't brush my teeth because I haven't eaten breakfast. Are you on a routine for brushing your teeth?
You know, the worst thing is I still haven't brushed my teeth.
Oh, is that what the smell is? No. So you're on a routine. You see, you're on a robot. You're on a routine.
I am. And I'm definitely not hungry in the middle of the night because I never eat in the middle of the night.
So,
I've got picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, so, babe, and if we go back to our babies in special care, they had them on a routine because they are robots. They have a robot thing. They know we need to give them warmth. We need to give them this much oxygen. We need to give them this much food. Is that roboting? I think so. Anyway, so if you're following a routine, then you can say, well, for the 6-week check, I have my check at 4:30 because we can get there. Yep. I can put the baby in the pram. Yep. My main squeeze, my partner, my husband, my wife, my whoever, because you can be a mum with a wife, because we have lots of same-sex couples, and they had that show on recently, Parents Guidance, and one of our same-sex couples was on there. Anyway, can tap the baby to sleep at 4:30 in the routine, or can take the baby for work. You know that you can do your 6-week check at that time of night because the baby be having a little out and about sleep.
That's right.
So you can plan stuff.
Yes, of course you
And
can.
then-
if you don't know what your baby's doing, I don't know how mums without a routine. What if baby's hungry at checkup? How can you ignore the hunger and weigh your baby instead? I don't get it.
No, but we're talking about your checkup.
Oh, my
So you're lying there getting your tummy checked, your 6-week check.
I don't think
and
that.
doing all this, you see, you did, but the kids were in hospital, you probably didn't even know. And how can you do that when your baby's screaming for hunger and your boobs are going, psh, psh. I just spat as well as milk. It wasn't milk, it was spit. But how can you do that when the baby's screaming and you're having your 6-week check?
Yeah.
Okay, you need a routine.
You need a routine.
So anyhow, so you need a routine. And the feedback I get is that the routines help these mums. Okay, now why are the
Rather than
routines
hinder.
different for breastfeeding and for bottle feeding? Because the routines are based on what a mum's needs are. You
Yes.
know? Breastfeeding mum's milk, that's what the routines are based on. Bottle feeding is different. Now, people say, oh, you can't use a breastfeeding routine, your milk will dry up. That were the old-fashioned routines. My routines are modern-day routines. What else do you want to know about the routines?
I think, just looking down at something I've highlighted when I started to reread the book, in anticipation for my third baby here, is the other great part about having a routine and knowing that your baby's in bed at 7 o'clock is that time with your partner.
Exactly.
You know, and I just think that that's a topic that gets flown out the window as the main caregiver of a child. Your other relationships, and especially that all-important one with perhaps the child's other parent, it just becomes second, third, fourth down the list, and in not a long period of time that can become a problem and shouldn't, you know. And so I really, really, really appreciate a baby on a routine for that reason. 7 o'clock, I get to spend some time with Luke, and it's always been that way, and it's a really important part of life. And life in 2022, you know, it's a modern thing.
And COVID life. Like imagine not having a baby on a routine and you're only allowed to go out of the house at a certain time. Can you imagine like living through that COVID lockdown in Melbourne where you were only allowed to go out of the house for a certain amount of time, and then you got everything ready to go out of the house, and then you got out of the house and you got 5 minutes out the door for your 1 hour of exercise where you had to leave the house, the baby's screaming because it wants a feed. I wonder how many mums, can I tell you a little secret?
Please.
I drive around and I see these people out walking at 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, I look in the pram, oh, they've got a Tizzie hole comforter, or they're on my routine.
Yeah,
You know?
That's nice, yeah.
At the shop, at the hub, we used to watch them, the hub's gone, but yeah. So the routine, now why the 7 o'clock bus?
Oh yes, why?
So 7 o'clock bus. So on the routine, we say that babies have to go to bed at 7 o'clock at night. So the reason we put a baby to bed at 7 o'clock at night is because if you put a baby into bed at 7 o'clock at night, not now, and we'll discuss sleep cycles later, but babies start to sleep in sleep cycles, and by the time they're about a year old, they're sleeping in a lot of sleep cycles. So a young baby can go to bed and can sleep for hours and hours and hours, no sleep cycles.
Okay.
At 8 weeks old, which we'll discuss later on, they start rising from sleep cycles in the day, and that becomes catnapping. And at night time, from about 6 months, they get a nighttime sleep cycle, and then another one, and then by a year old, they're having 4 or 5 sleep cycles. So they'll wake at 7, 9, 11.
Are you determining, is a sleep cycle meaning from a baby falls asleep and then completely awakes again? Is that a sleep cycle?
Sleep cycle, so well done, because I always just know so much, I never really explain it very well sometimes. You know, so sleep cycle is what everyone sleeps in sleep cycles. We don't all go to bed, go asleep and stay asleep all night.
Okay.
As adults, we go to bed, we sleep in a short sleep cycle first, and you get a good rest in that. Like during the day, you could just have a little cat nap. You could just put your head down and have a sleep. I think Google do that. They have sleep hubs for people.
I do
pods,
that too.
sleep pods. So you have like a short little sleep where you get a reasonable amount of sleep, and then you have a long sleep. So with a baby, they do a 40-minute short, a 1-year-old, they do a 40-minute short sleep cycle and then a double, like, what is it?
80, an hour and 20, is that right?
No, 120, what's 2 hours? 120, 80. So they do 40 minutes short sleep cycle, 80 minutes long sleep cycle, wake at the 2-hour mark. Yep. But that is really important. That deep sleep is when their filing cabinet works, they sort the whole brain out, they go over stuff in dreams that they did during the day, they remember trying to take a step, they remember trying to fall. Like, did you know that when a baby crawls around a room and they know that there's a step there, and they're crawling around the room and they come to a step and they go backwards down the step, when that baby starts to walk, their brain doesn't know that there's a step there. It looks totally different, and they need to relearn that there's a step, but they do all this in that really important sleep time.
Okay.
And a baby who sleeps, makes eye contact, looks at people, is happy. People talk, people engage with babies who sleep. Babies who don't sleep and the mum's feeding them every hour at night and they're restless and they're crying and they're cranky, they don't make eye contact, they don't look at people. They're constantly hungry. A baby who is fed every hour or 2 hours at night is starving hungry because they're getting like this watery milk and they're unhappy and they don't want to be put down, and then people call it separation anxiety. It's called hunger. They're hungry. So these babies who have this kind of separation anxiety at 9 months, babies do realize at 9 months that they're different to mum or dad and that they're not the same, and you know, they want they get upset when you leave the room and stuff. But a lot of the cases with a lot of children, that isn't what's going on. Some that is, but others are like so hungry that they don't want mum out of sight because she's food.
Sure.
And they're starving even though they're fed a lot. So anyway, you put them to bed at 7 o'clock at night and they sleep, short sleep cycle, long sleep cycle. They wake at 9 o'clock, everything's the same, back to sleep. Short sleep cycle, long sleep cycle, wake, everything's the same, back to sleep. If you put a baby to bed at 7 o'clock at night, their morning wake-up sleep cycle is 5 a.m.
Okay.
They wake up at 5 a.m., they look around, or everything's the same, back to sleep. If you put that same baby to bed at 7:40 p.m., they wake up, so then their morning sleep cycle becomes 5:40 a.m. Yeah?
I know what's going to
They
happen.
can wake up and go, the birds are singing, it's light. Oh, it's time to start the new day. Wah, wah, mum, dad, come get me. It's time to start the day. And that's them awake and they've lost 2 hours of sleep. So
Makes
that's
so
why
much
the 7
sense.
o'clock bus is important.
It makes so much sense. I have heard once before, even for adults, that the most restorative sleep happens between 7 and 12. I don't know if that's got anything to do with your research, but I think 7 o'clock just works. And I like too as well that a baby that goes to bed at 7 and wakes at 7 is going to turn into a child that goes to bed at 7 and wakes at 7. And 7 is just the perfect time to wake up in preparation for kinder and school.
Or like us, our children get the bus to school every day. And they have to be on the bus. My kids constantly go on about the fact that, like, you know, at the weekend they stay up a bit later and then they don't sleep in. And then during the week we put them to bed at, so Killian's always having a bit of a tanty about the fact that I've got really good kids and going away on this boat trip, I was just so proud of them. And most of it's sleep. Like I just thought, oh my goodness, we have just put so much work into the routine, keeping them on a routine, using a routine, you know. And they were just so good, and I'm just so glad that we had those boundaries for them. But now it's funny because Killian gets really upset because we aim to put them. Kieran is supposed to go to bed at 7:30. He's 7. Killian's supposed to go to bed at 8:30.
Okay.
He's 11.
Yes.
If the girls are there, they go at various times, you know, and then Dara goes to bed about 9 o'clock, depending if he's got swimming early in the morning, he has to be up at 5:30 early, okay? Killian gets really, really upset because it's like, we don't get Kieran to bed at 7:30. We're lucky to have him in bed at 8:40. Yeah? And then Killian's like, I'm not going to bed 20 minutes after my brother. And it's like, I'm not going to, and it's like, okay, or I'm not going to bed at the same time as my brother. And it's like, okay, you go to bed at 9. And then it's all, but they go to bed kind of on a routine during the week, and then the weekend, and then they don't wake up because they've gone to bed at a reasonable time, and you've got to wake them in the morning. Then the weekend, they stay up late, and they're up at the crack of dawn. And
they're missing their bus, do you think?
Yeah,
is that what it is?
And then they keep saying, the earlier we go to bed, like they know it. They quote the book. It's funny. And talking of a routine, we proved that the routine works. Have you ever heard them say, one of the myths is Tizzie Hall didn't even follow her own routines with her children?
I have heard that, yeah. So did you follow the routine with your children?
It depends when. So this is where that came from.
Right.
So that came from a radio interview.
Yes.
So I did a radio interview. I had a friend who was cycling in the Tour de France. And I did a radio interview because he was my child's godfather.
Okay.
Dara's godfather. And I was asked to do a radio interview. And the boys who are actually here recording this, these boys, the team, they actually met this person when they came up to do some filming at the warehouse.
Fantastic.
Anyway, so we went away to watch this guy in the Tour de France. And while we were there, we got there and we had the routine and we had Dara and he was on the routine and we got there and the routine was brilliant. And then it seems to be when you come home, I don't know what it is about coming home. Maybe it's when you get there, you've got the adrenaline, you've got all your family and friends, everything's good. And then when you get home, maybe it's a downer. Back to Australia, it's not home. Home's there, sorry. When you come back to Australia, the other place, not home, home's Ireland, it's like you're on some type of downer. And so the radio interview I was doing was because we'd been to the Tour de France and this person had come second and it was very exciting at the time and whatever, and radio interview. And they said to me, well, do you follow the routine with your own child? And I said, well, actually, funny you should say that. So what happened was we got back from France and I stopped doing the routine. And I thought, I don't need to do the routine. Like, I am the routine. It's the book. Like, I know it. So I thought, well, I'm going to just, I'm not going to get him up at 7, I'm too tired.
Okay.
So he got up at 8. And then we did up at 8, bed instead of 9 o'clock, bed at 10 o'clock. The next day up at 8:30. Instead of bed at 9 o'clock, we did bed at 10:30. And it was chop and change, chop and change, chop and change. And he was on formula. So it wasn't even, as we said before about the formula, it wasn't even like the breast milk was an issue, okay? Anyway, next thing we had this absolutely screaming mess. Wow. He was 6 months old. He was screaming. He was so unhappy. He was impossible to be around. He was a nightmare. Nathan said, I'm getting the book. I'm staying home. And I'm putting him back on your routine. Yeah. Nathan's my husband.
Wow.
I'm putting him back on your routine. Nathan took the day off work, stayed home, put him back, clock fixed. It was like a switch. Non-routine, screaming baby, routine, perfect baby. So when they asked me this, I said, and they said, oh, you didn't follow the routine with your own child, huh? And that was the tagline that got stolen. Wow. And then everyone used it.
Okay.
We were talking about 4 days.
Right.
4 days. And then they asked me, so, if your baby's catnapping, do you run and get the book and look up the cat? And I'm like, no, I am the book. Like, if my baby's catnapping in the first 8 weeks, try moving him to the next routine. I don't need to get the book to read that. I know it off by heart. So that's where that came from.
You just must implement it yourself. And thank you, myth busted. Yes. So I'm happy about that little story. Thank you. What do you think? Is it time for a question?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Who have we got our question from this week?
Make it an easy one. We don't really know what the questions are. We've kind of put the questions in there and they just fly up, and we've decided to do it ad hoc like that because we just think it's a better way to do it. So you have to join the Save Our Sleep support group. The way to get into the Save Our Sleep support group is, if you buy a Mercedes car and you get free, I don't have a Mercedes car, so probably not a good example, but if you buy a Volkswagen car, or you buy a Mini Cooper. A Mini Cooper, they're good, right? You buy a Mini Cooper, yeah? And talking of cars,
oh yes,
there's a really yucky smell coming from the front of my van. Like burnt animal. Okay, I'm going to work out what that is. That's my mission. And I've got no husband because he's in lockdown with his parents.
Are you handy under the hood?
I'm a bit scared to open it. Do you think I went into a bird or something?
Possibly.
Like, it's a bit smelly. It's got this... I don't know how I know what it's burnt animal. It smells like roast pork. Okay, next week you can ask me what the roast pork was, right? Okay.
Notes taken.
Okay, so anyway, with a car, you might get free servicing. So you buy the car. I set my business up on Honda Civic, yeah? So Honda Civic was a car. And it was like, you bought the Honda Civic. And then it was like, when people came back to the Honda garage, do you have Honda in Australia?
We do.
Yeah. And people came back to the Honda garage and they're going, oh, I've got a Honda Civic, I want to go up a car. They're like, oh, you get the new Honda Civic, and it was a bit bigger. Right. And then people would go back and say, oh, I've got married now, I've got I've got married and I've got kids now. I want a Honda Civic. And you go back to Honda and they go, oh, we've got the new family Honda Civic. And Honda grew the car with And I set Save Our Sleep up like that. I was like, you're going to have baby, and then it's going to be baby sleeping bags, and then it was toddler, and then it was child, and that's how I tried to base it on Honda Civic. And one of the things you get with a car is if you buy a car, you get free servicing. And it was like when we opened the hub, people kept coming to the hub with babies that didn't sleep. And then I'd give them, you know this, I'd lend them the bedding. I'd actually lend them the bedding. They'd come in, I'd say, your baby's hungry or cold. No, you don't need to do sleep training. No, you don't need to do cry out. No, you don't need to do controlled crying.
No.
You need to try bedding. And then people would try the bedding and they'd come back and go, oh my goodness, it worked. So we'd lend the bedding. We'd have brand new bedding that we'd washed and cleaned, all perfect, lend it to them, try before you buy. They'd come back in, they'd want the bedding. So then it was like, it was really hard to say to people, I can't give you the advice till you got the bedding. So then we're like, how are we going to do it? And then I used to charge people for the advice. And then it was like I'd charge people $400, $500, $600 for one-on-one advice. But then I'd have to tell them to buy the bedding. And I felt really awkward. So you know what I do now? I now say, you buy the bedding and you get the advice free. So this is what the Facebook support group is. You buy the bedding. So that why I'm saying this is about the question. So it's like the club, it's like the cult, it's like the Save Our Sleep community, cult, club, church,
it is a
religion.
Community.
You buy the bedding, you join the support group, and then you get one-on-one with me and everyone else and Zoe and all these although Zoe's currently banned from Facebook. That we'll talk about that next week. Anyway, so you get help in there. And you can ask a question. And then these questions are on the podcast thing in the support group. And this is where Zoe's randomly picked a question. That was the long way to the question. Question, please.
So this week's question is from Bianca. She asks, how do you and should you stretch out your baby's awake time if they're crying from tiredness? What's the best way to do this, i.e. gradually from the start? So gradually from the start, what does she mean by that, do we think?
I'm a bit confused.
I think, is she asking from the start as in when you first implement the routine with a newborn baby that you've just brought home?
Okay. I think it's a good question if we were to slightly change it to, first of all, she said her baby's crying a tired cry. So I don't think she's new to this because otherwise she would know what the cry was. So if she's saying that her baby's crying a tired cry, do you know what a lot of people miss? In the book, on page, depending on which book you have. So open your book on page 120.
I love that you know the pages.
Oh, I must have a really old book because it ain't on my page 120. Page 119. I do, I know the pages. Okay, so here we go. Here's an example, Page 120 of this book looks like this. And hold yours up.
Oh, we're showing.
So this is a new book.
Our YouTube followers here.
So if you look at this, right, people miss these tips.
Yes.
So these tips, so you're on page 119. So these tips used to be here on page 119.
Right.
But the problem was that people thought the tips belonged to this routine. Because at the end of each routine, there's a tip.
Yes.
And people thought the tip belonged to the routine.
Yes.
So then people who pick up the book and just read the routines miss the tips, but those tips belong to all of these routines.
Okay, they're just general tips.
So this is how the book changes.
Okay.
So in the most current copy of the book, even though they've got the same cover, they're still different.
Okay.
In the most current copy of the book, the tips have been moved to be clearer on page 120. So she's got a tired baby. If you read the tips, it says, you can put your baby down for a sleep sooner. So if your baby's crying because it's tired, Bianca, it's okay to put your baby down for a sleep, so long as your baby still makes it to the next feed time. So Bianca, if you truly believe that your baby is crying because they are tired, you may put your baby down to bed. You don't have to go, oh, the routine says this time. The routines are a guide. And this is where the publisher upset me in the first book. It's changed now. Okay. The original book said, you must adhere to this routine in order for this to work. You must adhere to this routine in order for this. You must adhere. Oh, it was horrible. But that's not in this book now because we've taken that little bit out. But So if your baby's tired, yes, you may put your baby down to sleep earlier, so long as they still get to the feed time.
Okay.
If they don't get to the feed time, then I would say just hold, if you're thinking they're tired and they're crying and they're grizzly, take them for a change of scenery, like outside, show them the trees, show them the birds, see if that calms them down, you know? If that doesn't calm them down, try playing with some water with them. But if they're really tired, then they probably will need to go to bed, and that's okay. You can put them to bed early. And the other thing is if they're hungry. So if they wake up and they're screaming and you think they want food, pick them up, keep them wrapped, hold them, tap them back to the rhythm of your heartbeat, maybe shove your little finger in if it's clean, let them have a suck and get them to the next feed time. So that's it for today.
That's it.
But let's remember next week. My challenge for the week is to stay COVID-free, but I'm not seeing Nathan, so I will.
Yes.
Let's hope Nathan and his mum, Dad seems to be doing well, get over this COVID quicker than what we think.
Yes.
And I'm going to find out what the smell is in my car. That's on my plan. And what are you doing?
Just going to be a mum this week.
Don't say that, because that's what I tried to do last week. And then I became a mum and a dad and a school teacher, because they had to stay home from school for a few days while we worked out where the COVID came from and if we'd been exposed.
Of course. That's the life, isn't it?
Right, remember, YouTube, subscribe, tell your friends, let us know what you think.
Yep, get in touch.
Yeah.
Thanks. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. You have been listening to the Save Our Sleep podcast, brought to you by the International Baby Whisperer Pty Limited. You will find more information about the Save Our Sleep philosophy, products, support, and how to watch the podcasts at saveoursleep.com. You may find the Save Our Sleep social media accounts by searching Tizzie Hall on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for all my how-to videos and to watch this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast and you would like more, please rate the podcast and share it with your friends. I would like to thank Zoe Starr for co-hosting, the Torched team for this production, and most of all, you, the listener. Without you, there would be no reason for this podcast. Please enjoy, stay safe, and Zoe and I will look forward to chatting with you again next week.